Hello everyone and welcome to another Commander Tactics Deck Tech. My name's Pope. In today's video we're going to be exploring the potential of one of the most unique and exciting new legendary creatures of the past couple years, and that is the Orzhov mastermind that is Teysa Karlov. Teysa has been in Magic for quite some time now, but her most recent iteration is a 2/4 human advisor for 2 a black and a white that reads, if a creature would die and cause a trigger of a permanent you control to trigger, then it happens an additional time. And the icing on the cake with this Teysa is that creature tokens we control have vigilance and lifelink. Twice the triggers on death triggers is something that we have never really had available to us in the command zone, and pairs so well with the Orzhov Aristocrats archetype. We're going to leverage the powerful abilities by using our life as a resource to get ahead and keep our side of the table afloat. We're really going to hammer home the death triggers and use our token generation more as fodder and less as a combat piece. And then at the end of the day, we're going to set up the pieces at the right time to eventually grind out our opponent's life to nothing through combos and effects. And this whole deck can be acquired today for less than $50. But that's enough of this pre-show. Let's dive into the featured presentation, taking a look at how we are going to manipulate our life total and take over, starting with Zulaport Cutthroat, Vindictive Vampire, and Falconwrath the Noble. Each of these creatures have similar effects that say whenever another creature we control dies, each opponent or target opponent loses a life and we gain a life. This effect by itself can be super strong within the Aristocrats archetype, but with Teysa on board, it doubles up each ping and each life gain, putting our opponents on a very short clock. Along with these three, we also have Cruel Celebrant, Sir Conrad, and Bontu's Monument, which provide similar effects. Cruel Celebrant pings whenever a creature or planeswalker we control dies. Sir Conrad, recently from Eldraine, has a wall of text but says basically whenever a creature dies, enters our graveyard, or leaves our graveyard, Sir Conrad is going to ping each opponent for 1. Then we can also pay 1 in a black to make each player mill 1 card. And lastly, Bontu's Monument. It won't get the Teysa bonus, but it does reduce all of our black spells by 1 generic mana, and whenever we cast a creature, we drain each opponent for 1. These drain effects are absolutely how we are going to keep our opponent's life totals in check while also using our life to get ahead and win the game. Next up, we have 4 cards that are going to help us make sure we have all the answers when we need, even if it means we have to give up a little bit of life to get there. Dark Prophecy, Midnight Reaper, Read the Bones, and Corpse Augur. Dark Prophecy, an enchantment for triple black, says whenever a creature you control dies, you draw a card and lose a life. With Teysa on board, we will draw 2 and lose 2. Also, it's good to note that Dark Prophecy doesn't care if it's a token. That is very helpful. Midnight Reaper, for 2 and a black, we get a Zombie Knight creature. Whenever a non-token creature we control dies, Midnight Reaper is going to deal 1 damage to us, and we're going to get to draw a card. Again, doubling if Teysa is on board. Read the Bones, just a basic sorcery. Scry 2, then we're going to draw 2 and pay 2 life. I think it's important to not undermine the power to scry 2 before we get to draw. This can really help us ensure we get to those cards that we need. Corpse Augur, another creature. Whenever Corpse Augur dies, we're going to draw X cards and lose X life, where X is the number of creature cards in target player's graveyard. Depending on the life total and the board state and graveyard state of each of our opponents, we can use Corpse Augur to either get a ton of cards and sacrifice some life, or choose a less heavy creature graveyard to get a little less cards but at a little less life. And of course, if Teysa is on board, this will double trigger. And to round things out, we have Command the Dreadhorde and Bolas's Citadel, both coming from War of the Spark. Command the Dreadhorde says choose any number of target creatures or planeswalkers in any graveyard. Command the Dreadhorde is going to deal damage to us equal to the total converted mana cost of those cards, and then we get to put them onto the battlefield under our control. If our opponents have some bombs, we can bring them back, but really we're going to be using this to get our pieces back. A lot of our creatures have low CMC, meaning we're just going to get to recur all those powerful effects and trigger them again. And then one of the most absurdly powerful artifacts, Bolas's Citadel. We can look at the top card of our library anytime. We can play the top card of our library. If we cast the spell, we pay life instead of paying its CMC. And then as if that wasn't enough, we can tap it, sacrifice 10 non-land permanents. They can be tokens, by the way, and each opponent is going to lose 10 life. Again, with our deck having such a low CMC curve, Bolas's Citadel is going to help us sift through our deck and get those creatures, effects that we want out onto the board. But now let's take a look at all the death triggers and token generation we're going to be doing in this deck, starting things off with Sifter of Skulls, Zathrid Necromancer, Requiem Angel, and Pitiless Plunderer. These 4 cards are each going to help us generate lots of tokens and get to double dip thanks to Teysa. Sifter of Skulls, whenever another non-token creature we control dies, we're going to put a 1/1 Eldrazi Scion onto the board that we can then sacrifice to add a colorless mana to our mana pool. Zathrid Necromancer, whenever this card or another human we control dies, which we do run a lot of humans in this deck, we're going to put a 2/2 black zombie onto the battlefield tapped, but with Teysa we're going to get 2 of them. Requiem Angel, whenever another non-spirit creature we control dies, we get a 1/1 white spirit creature token with flying. And Pitiless Plunderer, one of the hidden gems of this deck. Whenever another creature we control dies, it can be a token by the way, we're going to create a treasure. With Teysa on board, with each creature dying, Pitiless Plunderer is going to create us 2 treasure, and having access to all that mana is an absolute recipe for an easy win. A few more token generators in the deck: Ministrant of Obligation, Oketra's Monument, and Open the Graves. Ministrant of Obligation has Afterlife 2, so whenever it dies, we're going to create 2 1/1 black and white spirit creature tokens. Again, with Teysa on board, we're going to get 4 tokens. Oketra's Monument going to reduce the cost of all of our white spells by 1, and whenever we cast a creature spell, we're going to get a 1/1 white warrior creature token with Vigilance. Unfortunately, Oketra's Monument doesn't benefit anything from Teysa, but having that token and reducing our mana cost is a very powerful effect. And then Open the Graves and enchantment. Whenever a non-token creature we control dies, we get a 2/2 black zombie creature token. This deck does have a ton of triggers and effects like these, so do make sure that if you play this deck or run a deck similar to this, you keep track of when it says non-token creature. This is very relevant, but many of them do capitalize on it not mattering. Next up, we have 2 cards that are going to help us scry through our deck whenever our creatures die: Ward-Eye Witch and Shadows of the Past. Ward-Eye Witch, a new common from Modern Horizons. Whenever Ward-Eye Witch or another creature we control dies, we get to scry 1. I'm a firm believer that people do not really appreciate the power of scrying, and with Ward-Eye Witch, we're going to continue to dig and scry until we find exactly what we need. And then Shadows of the Past, an enchantment for only 1 and a black, says whenever a creature dies. So this one, it doesn't even have to be our creature, just any creature on the board. We're going to get to scry 1. And then for 4 and a black, we can make each opponent lose 2 life, and we're going to gain 2 life. But we can only activate this ability if there are 4 or more creature cards in our graveyard. Also, it is important to note that even though Shadows of the Past will trigger off of our opponent's creatures dying, we will still get the benefit of Teysa, since it is our permanent triggering. And next up, we have a few free sack outlets for the deck to ensure we're able to sacrifice our creatures and tokens when we need to: Altar of Dementia, Fanatical Devotion, and Vishkal Blood Arbiter. Altar of Dementia was reprinted in Modern Horizons and is at the cheapest point it's been in a very long time, but it is just like any other altar. We can sacrifice a creature to it to do something, and with Altar of Dementia we can make a target player mill cards equal to the power of the sacrificed creature. Fanatical Devotion is a unique enchantment for 2 and a white that says we can sacrifice a creature to regenerate another target creature. We can use Fanatical Devotion to help protect against any board wipes, or if we want to defend against big attacking creatures, we can regenerate one of our creatures simply by sacrificing a token. And then Vishkal Blood Arbiter, what a bomb, for 4 a white and 2 black. Legendary Vampire, flying lifelink. We can sacrifice a creature to put X +1/+1 counters on Vishkal, where X is that creature's power, and then we can remove all the +1/+1 counters from Vishkal to give target creature -1/-1 till the end of turn for each counter removed from him. The importance and value of free sacrifice outlets in this deck cannot be pressed enough. We need to make sure we can get rid of our creatures when we need to, and it also lets us get around any effects that might try to exile our side of the board. But now that we know how we are going to keep up our side of the board and start to drain our opponent's life, let's take a look at how we're going to combo out and control our opponent's side of the board and win some games. Starting things off with Plague Crafter, Merciless Executioner, and the Eldest Reborn. Plague Crafter for 2 and a black comes down and says whenever it enters the battlefield, each player sacrifices a creature or a planeswalker. This includes us. And then each player who can't discards a card. And Merciless Executioner, very similar effect, but doesn't target planeswalkers or make people discard. Whenever it enters the battlefield, each player just simply sacrifices a creature. What makes these two creatures so strong in this deck is that whenever they enter, we can actually sacrifice them to their own ability and trigger all of our permanents that benefit from death triggers. And then the Eldest Reborn, each opponent is going to sacrifice a creature on turn 1 when we play this. Turn 2, each opponent is going to have to discard a card. And on turn 3, we're going to get to put a creature or planeswalker from any graveyard onto the battlefield under our control. These effects that make our opponents sacrifice and not make us destroy or exile something help us get around things like hexproof or indestructible. Next up, we have two creatures that are going to kill things whenever we lose things, and that is Butcher of Malakir and Archon of Justice. Butcher of Malakir, a flyer for 5, a black and a black, so a little expensive, says whenever Butcher of Malakir or another creature you control dies, so it can be a token, each opponent has to sacrifice a creature. This means for each one creature we lose with Teysa on the board, each opponent is then going to have to sacrifice 2 creatures. The math shapes up to that with Teysa on a full board, for every one creature we lose, we are essentially killing 6 other creatures, which is insane value. And then Archon of Justice, a 4/4 flyer for 3, a white and a white. Whenever it dies, we get to exile any target permanent. Archon of Justice having the ability to exile any permanent is just so strong in this deck, and with Teysa we get to target 2 things, not just 1. And the last 2 cards I want to talk about in this deck are Revelark and Karmic Guide. Revelark for 4 and a white says whenever it leaves the battlefield, we get to return up to 2 target creatures with power 2 or less from our graveyard straight to the battlefield. And if we want, we can pay its evoke cost in case we don't have a sack outlet to make it to where it comes in and instantly dies. And Karmic Guide for 3, a white and a white has an echo cost, so if we don't pay its echo cost, it dies at the next turn's upkeep. Whenever Karmic Guide enters the battlefield, we can return any target creature card from the graveyard to the battlefield. If you're not familiar with the Revelark Karmic Guide combo, this is one of the earliest combos I ever learned and is just sort of a pet favorite of mine, so let me explain it to you. The pieces needed for this combo are any sack outlet, any death trigger creature that drains on death, either in the graveyard or on the battlefield, and Revelark and Karmic Guide. The loop we'll be creating produces infinite ETB effects and infinite death triggers, which means infinite draining via the creature of our choice. Also, depending on the sack outlet of our choice, we actually don't even need the drain creature. For this example, we're going to start with Zulaport and Karmic Guide in our graveyard and Altar of Dementia on the board. We'll start by casting Revelark. We then sack the Revelark to the altar, which lets us return Zulaport and Karmic Guide from our graveyard to the battlefield since their power is equal to 2 or less. When Karmic Guide enters, it's going to allow us to return Revelark to the battlefield. We are now in the state where we started. We can then sack Karmic Guide and Zulaport to the altar, getting the drain life triggers off of Zulaport and mill triggers off of our Altar of Dementia, and then we can sack Revelark to repeat the process until all of our opponents have been drained out and we win the game. And one last card that I wanted to mention right here because it is so strong in this deck, and that's Skull Clamp. This 1 cost artifact, whenever we equip it to a creature, it's going to give the creature +1/-1. But whenever the equipped creature dies, we're going to draw 2 cards. Now, with Teysa on board, this means we can equip one of our small tokens, it will instantly die, and we'll get to draw 4 cards for 1 mana. If we're able to get Skull Clamp on board with any sort of token generation, there is no doubt we are going to run away with the game with the amount of card advantage this single card generates. But now that we've got the blueprints all laid out, let's take a look at what else is inside the 99. For this deck's removal and control, we have about 6 targeted removal spells and 3 board wipe spells, but we also have about 7 force, sacrifice, or edict effects. Card advantage in this deck is looking very strong with about 11 spells having card draw or card advantage across different enchantments and creatures. We should have no problem keeping a full hand at all times. And lastly, our mana ramp, we are looking very good, running 7 mana rocks, and then we have 2 creatures that are going to generate us mana tokens that we can use to help ramp out into bigger and better spells. And then how are we going to win with this deck? Well, we're going to start by playing creatures and effects that are going to help us drain our opponent's life. And with Teysa on board, we're going to double dip, taking twice that much life and gaining double. Then we're going to use effects that are going to create us lots of tokens to help us have a strong board presence, but also use those tokens as ammunition to fire away at our opponent's life. And then if that hasn't won us the game yet, we're going to use some combo material using cards that are going to help us sack creatures to deal damage and wash, rinse, and repeat that until all of our opponents are dead. A few budget alternatives we can run in this deck are Ethereal Absolution, Vampiric Rites, and Carrion Feeder. Ethereal Absolution is more geared towards the token-heavy decks, but it's going to give all of our creatures +1/+1, and each creature our opponents control -1/-1. Then it has the upside of we can pay 4 mana to exile a card from an opponent's graveyard. If it's a creature card, we get to create a 1/1 black and white spirit creature token with flying. Vampiric Rites, just another great sack outlet for 1 black mana. We can pay 1 and a black, sacrifice a creature to gain a life and draw a card. Although Teysa won't make Vampiric Rites trigger twice, it does allow us a sack outlet when we need it. And Carrion Feeder, another great free sack outlet. We can sack a creature at any time to put a +1/+1 counter on Carrion Feeder. Then if you're looking for a few cards to upgrade the deck and take it up a notch, we've got Athreos, the God of Passage, Kokusho, the Evening Star, and a Worm Coil Engine. These cards are all devastating when they hit the board. As long as Athreos is on the board, whenever another creature we control dies, return it to our hand unless target opponent pays 3 life. With Teysa, each opponent that doesn't want us to return it to our hand will in turn have to pay 6 life. Kokusho, with his extremely strong death trigger, whenever Kokusho the Evening Star dies, each opponent's going to lose 5 life, and we're going to gain life equal to the life lost this way, most likely 15, assuming we're in a 4-player pod. But again, with Teysa, we're going to get to deal 10 damage to each opponent and gain 30 life. Kokusho by himself with the sack outlet can absolutely just end games. And the baddest worm of them all, Worm Coil Engine, coming in with Death Touch and Lifelink for 6 mana. When Worm Coil Engine dies, we're going to get 2 3/3 colorless worm artifact creature tokens, 1 with Death Touch and 1 with Lifelink. But with Teysa on board, we come away with 4 artifact worms, 3/3s, 2 with Death Touch, and 2 with Lifelink. But that is going to do it for this Orzhov Aristocrat style deck. Once Teysa was previewed, I was so excited to build around her. She is a great commander with such a unique ability. If you're looking for a little extra flavor win and some great synergy, you might consider tossing in the other Teysas from previous blocks. For only $50, this deck can absolutely compete with some of the big dogs in the play group, and it is just such a fun and powerful deck to play. Let me know down in the comments below what cards you think I missed, what cards you think I should add. I know in this colorway with black and white, we can add a lot of upgrades, but keeping it under the $50 budget was really the big challenge here. If you enjoyed this deck tech though, make sure you hit that like button. Lets us know what we're doing is enjoyable. If you want to know when our next video goes live, then make sure to subscribe. A new Commander Deck Tech comes here every Friday at 9 a.m. Central. If you're on Twitter, head over there, drop us a follow at EDH Tactics. Thanks so much for watching, guys, and we'll see you for the next one.